as long as you're walking with Jesus, you will not be hindered and you will not stumble. I want to talk with you for a few minutes about living without hindrance. If you saw the title of this webcast, that's what I've entitled it, Living Without Hindrance. Wow, who wouldn't want that kind of a life? Hey, give me that. I'll sign up for that, right? Now, understand, when I talk about living without hindrance, and there's solid Bible basis for what I'm about to show you here in the book of Proverbs chapter 4, I'm not talking about living without opposition, okay? It is possible to be facing severe opposition but still not be hindered in continuing with your mission, continuing with what God has given you to do, continuing in the purposes of the Lord, okay? But it does require a particular perspective on life, a particular focus. I want to look at Proverbs chapter 4. Proverbs 4 verse 10 says, "Hear my son." Well, if you're not a son, maybe you're a daughter, okay? You can apply it to you as well, daughters of God, okay? "Hear my son, my daughter, receive my sayings, and the years of your life will be many." I'm so glad to hear that. That we're given a promise here of many years in life if we will receive the sayings of the wise. "I have taught you in the way of wisdom. I have led you in right paths." Here's the core and the heart of what I'm bringing to you tonight, right here in the next verse, verse 12. "When you walk, your steps will not be hindered. When you run, you will not stumble." I was reading on this week, but I read verse 12 and I couldn't get beyond it. I did finish reading the chapter, but I came back to verse 12. I kept meditating on it. Lord, there's something here you want me to see. And so I'm going to read it again. "When you walk, your steps will not be hindered. When you run, you will not stumble." When you walk, you will not be hindered. It is possible to live life without hindrance. Well, how can you say that, Dr. Turpin? I can say that because that's what the Bible says. But that doesn't line up with my experience, someone may say. How many of you know we don't gauge our lives by our experiences in the past or someone else's experiences? We gauge our life, we set the pace for our life according to what God says. Because we can live some pretty messed up experiences in life, okay? Where is a mixture of things going on, where maybe our heart is to please God, but often we will mix into the wisdom of God, some of the wisdom of man, some of our own thinking and our own ways of doing things. And a lot of times when we miss the mark, it's not because God is messed up or He hasn't given us accurate wisdom or guidance. It's because we've taken whatever He's given us and we've mixed in other things with it, and we end up missing the mark, okay? So I'm taking the word at face value here, and when you really ponder it, it makes a lot of sense. I'm talking about living without hindrance now. In Proverbs chapter 4, verse 12, I'm reading it again. It says here, Proverbs 4, verse 12, "When you walk, your steps will not be hindered. When you run, you will not stumble." Now, obviously, there must be a condition attached to this. Yes. And the condition is found in the verses that precede it. Okay? I'm going to go back to verse 10 now. We're in Proverbs 4 now, looking at verse 10. Proverbs 10 says this, "Hear my son, receive my sayings, and the years of your life will be many. I have taught you in the way of wisdom. I have led you in right paths." The Lord teaches us in the way of wisdom. The Lord leads us in right paths. Now, when I read that part about being led in right paths, I was reminded that of the 23rd Psalm, "The Lord is our shepherd." You guys hear that? Boy, that's the one There must be one big bumblebee making that sound. Let's back up. Forgive me. I'm supposed to be serious here. But in verse 10, hear my son, receive my sayings, and the years of your life will be many. I have taught you in the way of wisdom. I've led you in right paths. Now, when I read this about being led in right paths, I'm reminded of Psalm 23, the Lord our shepherd, who leads us in paths of righteousness or in right paths for his name's sake. His own integrity is at stake. His own reputation is at stake. And we know that God is always true to his word. His word says that he will lead us in the paths of righteousness. In other words, the way that the Lord leads us is always the right path. Often, when I look at any situation in life, I envision in my spirit the Lord Jesus standing right in front of me, leading me in the way that I should go. And I'm not just making that up. I'm not saying I'm having an actual mystical vision every time I envision that, okay? But I purposefully, in my own spirit, envision Jesus right before me, the Good Shepherd, leading me in the way that's called the right path. And I'm listening with an ear that's desiring to be instructed of him, listening to be instructed and guided in the right path. And if I immerse myself in the Scriptures, if I live my life in such a way that I've cultivated a hearing of his voice, a sensitivity to his leading, if I'm responsive to his voice and not ignoring his leading, guess what? I'm going to walk in the right path. I'm going to walk in the right path by his grace. Now, do I sometimes miss it? Yeah, of course I do. I'm human. And when I miss it, it's then that I stumble. It's then that I have difficulty. But here's the point. As long as you're walking with Jesus in the way that he's directing, in the right path, in the wisdom he's teaching us, you will not be hindered and you will not stumble as long as you're walking with him. So the promise is, when you walk, your steps will not be hindered. When you run, you will not stumble. That's Proverbs 4, verse 12. Now again, when I say that it is possible to live a life without hindrance, I'm not saying it's a life without opposition. But here's the thing. You can have all kinds of things being hurled at you, the enemy trying to distract you, the enemy trying to oppose you, people trying to oppose you. But as long as you've got your eyes on the Lord, you can walk right through the midst of that opposition, unhindered in fulfilling whatever it is that God has intended for you in that season and in that situation. And what is my authority for saying all of this? The Bible. I don't totally understand what I'm saying to you. This is not coming to you out of my intellect or out of my observation. It's coming to you simply because this is what God says in his word. And I just want to encourage you, if it's not your experience to live an unhindered life, begin to elevate his word over your experience. How about that? Begin to meditate on what his word has to say. And tonight, specifically, what he says about walking in your steps not being hindered, running and you not stumbling. Why not elevate what he says above your experience? But hey, remember, the condition to this is we're hearing and receiving his sayings. We're hearing and receiving wisdom. He's teaching us in the way of wisdom. We're letting him teach us. We're eager to hear. And we're letting him lead us in the right paths. The promise is, when you walk, your steps will not be hindered. When you run, you will not stumble. Again, it's when we mix in other wisdom, our wisdom, the world's wisdom, in with God's wisdom that we sometimes miss it in this regard, okay? So we're talking about a focus now. We're focusing on the Good Shepherd, who is always right before us if we're his children, ready and eager to lead us